Howdy y'all, got the Bulldog on the channel. What we got here today is an '09 Toyota Highlander. Customer came in for an oil change and he said, oh, I got a noise in the front end, I want you to listen to. And it was a pronounced noise. We didn't have to drive it very far to know what it is and general location of where it was. You always want to pinpoint these noises. This one was really evident, but I'll show you what we use to pinpoint that noise and what we're doing to repair it. This here is what you call a mechanic stethoscope. It's just a regular stethoscope with a metal stick mounted on the end of it, and there's a little diaphragm in here. You can put this to your ear, set this on something steel or any hard surface. The noise will transmit through that right into your ears. And we listen to hubs, wheel bearings, everything else, most of the time listening for bearing noise, water pump, anything like that. And that noise will come pretty clear through your ears. Now this is off right now, but you'll have somebody in there driving it, spinning the wheels, and you'll set your scope right there next to the wheel bearing. Now, every once in a while you have a noise transmitting through the differential. So what I always do is I'll listen to one side and then I'll listen to the other, and compared between the two, you determine which one it is. This one here was completely quiet. This one here just about deafened me. Our problem's over here. Now there's no outward sign that this thing is bad. The wheel is not loose, but once I get this thing apart, I'm going to take this bearing apart and show you why it's making that noise. I'm sorry I can't recreate the noise on the video. Most of the time when you're listening to it is a roaring noise. Wah, 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 wah. It's usually not a grinding noise. Grinding noise is usually associated when everything has completely disintegrated and you're, running on other parts. But I'll take this one apart and I'll show you what causes this and, some things you can do to prevent repeat failures. Now on this setup, we've got the strut here with the steering knuckle mounted on it. Now the wheel bearing is pressed inside the steering knuckle. So we're going to take this all apart to press that out. Two ways to do it. Either you can remove the entire strut, which is a little bit more work, but you don't disturb where the alignment is on this strut. The other way is, the way I'm going to do it, it's a lot easier, but if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, it's going to need an alignment afterwards. I take just a regular old level, set it across the hub, and see where my bubble is on my level. Here my bubble is just to the inside of the line. So when I put this thing back together, I'm going to, with these bolts loose, move it to the exact position it was in and tighten them up. That way, if it's not precise, it is really, really close. So, usually alignment is not required. Now, there are no slots in this strut, nor in the knuckle here. However, I don't trust that. I always measure first. The camber adjustment shouldn't change, but you can probably get a degree or two out of it. So I always measure before I take it apart. This gets this thing down to a much more manageable size before we start knocking everything apart. I was saying that I couldn't get spun, but with it off, you can spin it. That's pretty significant for noise when you can spin it by hand and get noise out of it. So that's bad. Now the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take and put a socket on the hub in here and hammer it out because we don't have a hub tamer or a way to really grab a hold of this knuckle to knock that out. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to use the press here to press the old bearing out. Okay, now we've got the hub out and I've got the race knocked off of it. Now for this bearing to come out, it has to come out in this direction. That way we got to pull this ABS shield. And it looks like a little bit of damage right here. So somebody's already put this bearing in once, at least. A little bit of damage there and a little bit of damage here. But we're gonna have to pop this race out so that we can get to the attachment under here in order to pull that bearing out. Okay, I got that shield popped out without too much damage. Now, this has got a snap ring in it. And what I like to do to dislodge them is take a punch and smack straight down on them all the way around. And that kind of knocks them loose, and then you're not trying to pull on it and you end up breaking off these tabs. And then you have a bad day. Working on it a little bit can be the difference between fighting it all day long, ruining stuff, and getting it out in a couple of minutes. Now, we're gonna go to the press and find something to block it up level, and we're gonna press on the other side, pop this bearing out. Now I've got this cribbed up pretty good. What's important is that you're pressing flat against it, and you're pressing on the race of the bearing in there. Okay, now I'm hitting the bottom. I might have to hammer it out the rest of the way because the bottom is so uneven. I can't get something cupped that will go all the way around it. Okay, now we've got this out. In here is the bearing race. This is the outer race. This is the inner race. You've got ball bearings that ride up against this inner race and against this outer race. If you've ever heard somebody say, or when I told you about it, when you're looking for a wheel bearing, you steer one direction and then the other, and the noise will get louder and then it'll get quieter. What you're doing is you're twisting this inner race, one side and then the other. Like this in there, exaggerated of course. But you're putting load against either this race or this race. Now there's two of them. There's one still in there. This one would be horrible on one side and quiet on the other. So I'll bet you when I knock that out, we're gonna see some nastiness. Nothing on this one. Ball bearings are still in there. We'll just pop them out. Come on. You're making me look bad on YouTube. Come on. All right, it was not the horrible looking thing that I was expecting, but it's bad nonetheless. The glare you can't see. Right here, there is a spot in there. You can see those lines. There's a reflection right here. Right here, now tilt it like this. There we go. There you can see, this is what I would call brindling. That's where the outer layer of metal ripples. This is a common problem on cheaper made bearings. Usually you see rust pitting and all that kind of stuff, but this here is an example of where they take the steel and it's heat treated so that it's really hard, but they only heat treat the outside of it. The outside of the steel, this is the inside here, but the outside of the steel where the bearing runs. And after it runs for a while, it develops ripples in it. And that makes a horrible noise. You wouldn't think it would, but it does. Here, we're getting closer and you can see a little bit. Now, if you do your own, you run your finger across it, and if you can feel it with the meat of your finger, it's bad, really bad. But that's what I wanted to show you there. That's what makes that noise. Every time the roller bearing goes across that, it makes a rumble noise, just like you're driving on rumble strips on the highway. Now I'm going to clean that hub out right there, and we're going to start pressing the new one in. I'm going to go down to the power wheel and clean these things off here, just so that everything slips together good. There we go, that's better. 60 seconds on the wire wheel will save you a lot of aggravation later, like several minutes, sometimes hours. Here's our new bearing for this here, national number 510100. Now, if you worry about damaging this, can you beat these in with a hammer? Yes, you can. Should you beat these in with a hammer? No, you should not. I used to do these, beating them in with a hammer. What happens is this seal will try to jump up out of there. You risk damaging this seal depending on where you're hammering on. I've seen people drive on the inner race to drive the whole bearing in. That will cause, on the cheaper bearings, the brindling that we just saw on the one we took out. You saw, I noted it, that bearing had been replaced once before, and that's what we saw, was brindling on the inside of the outer race. If you're worried about how to press these things in where you won't damage them, you know, the special adapters and all that kind of stuff, you have an adapter. The old bearing you just took out, you know it's the perfect fit to press down against the outside race. You press the outside race all the way in until it hits. Then we put in our lock and our ABS shield. Then what we do is we get something that fits this inner race, and we press against the center of our hub here and press that in. Just watch. Now we got that pressed in. Turn it over, make sure you're fully seated around here on the back side. Now we're going to put in our snap ring. Tap that in. All right, we're good and seated there. Now, we've got our little shield here. Line that up with your relief for the ABS sensor. Tap it in. You notice I'm not doing great big wallops. Just tiny tap, tiny tap. That's to protect the reluctor ring, spiker ring, whatever you want to call it, the ABS tone ring that's on the axle. It's in here. Now it's time to press the hub in. All right, we got the hub all together, ready to put it back in the vehicle. Now, checking everything, I got everything else tight except for the adjustment. Now I got the rotor pushed up against the hub here, and that bubble is exactly where it was before, just on the inside of center. I've got everything torqued down and it has not moved. Everything's torqued. All right, that does it on this one. I'm gonna take it out for a test drive, make sure everything's all right. But you can do this at home in your own shop, but you got to know what you're doing, or else you'll end up doing it over and over again. What you saw on that bearing is exactly why we buy high quality bearings. The cheaper it goes, the more you end up with stuff like that. You can still end up with it with name brand stuff. We have before. We try to avoid it as much as possible by buying quality parts. Anymore, that's getting kind of hard. Like, comment, subscribe, hit your little bell notification, share it all around. We'll talk to you later.